Yeah, how have you found it? Were you skeptical at first? What kinds of changes have you experienced in the process?
I was definitely skeptical. In my head, the thing that made me pull the trigger to move forward with it was, um, it really resonated in terms of just, I think a couple of, not a couple, probably one of the surveys where it was just talking about, um, how likely are you to burn out, or what are some of the symptoms, I would say. And I was filling that out, it really kind of felt like it hit more close to home. Where even at the end of that, when you were reviewing that the survey result of it, well, you're still like relatively healthy in that, and instead of like being code red in terms of like you're going to blow up at any time, it still felt like this was much more of a proactive step. And I think because I was in that mindset, it also allowed me to be more, um, skeptical isn't the right word, but perhaps hesitant with, um, thinking if there's any major change or if this could actually impact change, I would feel. As opposed to, say, if I were in a field of desperation and I'm seeking a solution like to implement right now and I'm desperate for it, and therefore I'm more willing to believe things because I'm desperate for it. Um, that wasn't the mentality that I had, and I'm comparing it to that. So that was kind of my mentality coming into that. And I think as I was going week to week with tracking things, again, I was really more so operating on, trying to be open minded and on autopilot. Meaning, when you would ask me certain questions of trying to, um, I think, pull on threads of, well, how do you think that this is helping, or why do you think we're tracking these things? How do you think that they're, um, you know, interacting with one another, and how do you think it relates to productivity? I wasn't doing a lot of, self reflection on that. It was really more of a, this is going to be an activity that I feel like I just want to input things, and then as we had those one-on-one discussions, I felt like those were the moments of reflection of certain things where you could be that unbiased opinion and ask those questions that could then, right then and there, make me feel a lot more self-reflective. But during that whole process, I think it kind of, um, it made me much more conscious of how I used my time, what I gear as important, and I think probably the biggest takeaway being, me feeling like I very much view myself as much more of a glass half empty type of person. And I felt like that was very much reflected on, even last week when we were kind of going through, or even actually, no, yeah, I'll just say all of them, all of the sessions that we had one on one, where it was pleasantly surprising in terms of, well, you have a lot of happy triggers or a lot of moments of happiness, and perhaps, I don't focus on that as much. I don't, emphasize, or, um, those happy moments don't have I thought, had those moments of, kind of afterglow where, that feeling of happiness is not for a very long period of time, but when you feel sad, those moments are emphasized, or you feel them, or I feel them a lot harder, and so I'm emphasizing how many of those moments, throughout the month versus happy. So that was kind of a very, eye-opening part where I was just like, oh, you have plenty of things to be happy for. You're just a very pessimistic person, and just take a moment to enjoy yourself for once. Like, geez, that was kind of the moment that I felt like. But so I think it was, this has been more of a month of just, much more of a self-reflection, if anything, as opposed to, um, any noticeable changes or differences, in my day to day, because this has been more of a, let's establish a baseline and I'll just track. But that tourist mindset that even was last week, I felt like was something very, very appreciative. Like, it's a very easy concept, to understand, but it's hard to implement. Or I thought it would be very difficult to implement. It's one thing to say it, and then it's another thing to do it. And so this was kind of the very interesting. It took away the skepticism I had in terms of I don't know if this would actually be helpful, and that was a first, I felt like, true exercise of, well, how can you change your mindset? And that was very rewarding once that happened. So that exercise, which I know only happened really yesterday, so it's, that there's not a lot of data points there, but that was very encouraging. So that's kind of been up until this point. So I feel like the vast majority of the month was just me kind of not really having much of a reflection. It felt like, unless it was those one-to-one sessions and you would ask me these thoughtful questions. But it felt like within the last couple of days to now moving forward, it feels more of like okay, and how can we start adjusting? How can you start being more proactive with those changes? So that's where I'm at currently.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. As we start building awareness, it's something that kind of like, reaches a critical mass at some point, and we understand why we should be taking a certain kind of action after we've actually examined what's happening in our life. And that's part of the process, right, for behavior change, starting with awareness of where we're at and just being like, oh, that's interesting. So some of these insights you had now are nudging you subconsciously to actually act a little bit differently potentially. And as you reinforce with certain new protocols that we'll be trying, I think you're going to see it come together more. So remember, before we started working together, you've asked me whether you think someone who's not as in touch with their emotions will be able to go through this, whether it might even work, and you weren't sure it might work for you. So how do you think the the month that we worked together addressed that?
Well, it very much forced me to acknowledge feelings throughout and not just because when I asked that initial question, it was very much more of a, when I was asking that question kind of pre this program and pre the tracking in general, I would have made the assumption that although I'll try to be as honest as I can and very transparent, but sometimes I just felt, and I think one of the questions in the survey was, like feeling very numb or just kind of going about your day without any seemingly ups and downs. Or in my case, I would emphasize the downs, and I knew that prior. And so it really was a feeling of not feeling confident with having an awareness of emotions. And so I, in my head, that was just something, a weakness that I always associated with. And so I think being forced to try to associate a feeling and then actually writing that down and then also trying to explain why do you feel that way, I felt like it forced me to have those moments of, oh yeah, right, why do I feel that way? Why do I feel like this? As opposed to it, instead of me just glossing over, it doesn't matter, like just get it done and then move on. And that, instead of encouraging that numbness, it was really more so encouraging just pause and what are you feeling and just get it down, which I thought it came a lot easier than I thought it would. And especially when you said, as you were going through the first couple of days and you put your comment saying, well, what does fine mean? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know what fine means. Like, it could be, like, it's just, in my head, it was like such a neutral part. And so again, like kind of that pulling and forcing that, conscious self-awareness, it was very helpful. And it didn't find it as tedious as I thought it would, which I thought was very helpful, because then when it came to the one-on-one sessions, they were very helpful, because sometimes I was kind of concerned where, what if I didn't have any feelings to write down, and they were just more task oriented? Like, what if I was just worried? I was like, I don't know what to put down. Like, there's no feelings there. But I don't know. I found it surprisingly much. I didn't find it a problem as we were going through. So my initial concern definitely kind of dispersed as we kind of went along with it, for sure.
Mhm. That's great. And have you discovered the benefit of tracking your emotions and getting more in touch with them?
For sure. I haven't done a good, like, I haven't kept up with my daily journal. I still am in the habit of at least doing it a couple of times a week, but it's not consistent, like a do it every Monday or Friday. Like, it will be kind of like a midweek, perhaps Tuesday, Wednesday, and then over the weekend, kind of that later of the week reflecting. And I found that those were very kind of helpful for me to do, where it would be both an exercise of trying to kind of highlight the obviously big moments in the day, like, so moments where you felt a certain emotion. So, like, how we rated it, like 1, 2, or 3, like those moments where it was an obvious two, and then perhaps some of the ones that like were 1.5s versus ones in my head, but of various emotions, and just writing those down, as opposed to just focusing on the next day and the next day and the next day, and just keeping it going. I just felt like having those moments of self-reflection and acknowledging kind of some of the highlights and lowlights of the day, um, has definitely benefited. Like, it's just kind of it's made the weeks not just feel more productive in the sense that, okay, yes, I did accomplish a lot, but it also made them feel more whole, in a way, like, as opposed to just kind of going about that numbness, and just kind of being on autopilot. Being able to kind of reflect and acknowledge how much you got done throughout the day, and kind of the roller coaster sometimes it feels, made it feel a lot more complete. Like, I don't know how else to explain it. Like, a lot more full of life, I guess, would be a better way. Like, just full. Which I think has been kind of cool. So, yeah, there you go.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And what would you tell people who are skeptical of getting in touch with their emotions to improve their productivity?
I don't think there's anything that I can really say well to a skeptic to kind of get them beyond that, because I just know I don't think I would believe anybody that would say anything. But I would just encourage them to give it a shot. Like, I didn't. I think even the 14 days that we kind of went through it, I think was very helpful. But then to actually go through it like much more in detail over the month, like, you can just kind of, I don't know how else to describe that. It is just kind of eye opening. Like, some of the concerns that I had were not really concerning, and I never would have gotten over that without just giving it a fair shot, like an open minded shot, not a I'm gonna forever be skeptical and I'm going to hurl questions at you every which way because I'm disbelieving of that. Like, if you're coming into this not just skeptical but like negatively skeptic, and you don't want this to actually work, and you're not open-minded enough to try to just give it a fair shot, then it probably won't work, because you're just going to find other ways to like rationalize your behavior, and not want to change anything, which is fine. So there's nothing that I can think I can say to a skeptic, other than just giving it a fair shot, and then if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I mean, it's only a month. Like, in the grand scheme of things, that's not a lot of time to give up.
Sounds good. Thank you so